Good evening, everybody. I make that 7 o'clock. And as such, good evening. Before we start the meeting, may I inform members, officers and the public that we are not expecting a fire drill today, but in the event of a fire alarm ringing, please do not exit via the lifts, but use the stairs via one of the main fire exit at either end of the chamber or the public gallery. I would also politely ask that you turn off your mobile phones and any other electronic devices or switch them to silent, please. I would like to welcome you all to this meeting, and especially Charisse Montaro, to your first meeting of this Scrutiny Committee. Welcome. So, moving swiftly on. Agenda item 1, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Anley.
Thank you very much. Item 2, interest. Does anybody have any interest to declare on any item on tonight's agenda? I take that as a no. Requests to address the meeting.
There've been none.
Thank you very much, Louise. Minutes of the meeting on the 12th of September 2024. Have you all had sight of the minutes of the meeting? And are you accepting those as a true record? Could I have a proposer, Martin Griffith and Councillor Marks? Thank you very much, and are we all in favour of that? Yep. Thank you very much. Item number 5, Children's Trust and Transformation and Efficiency Board update. This is Andrew Tagg, Director of Finance and Resources. So, moving over to Colin Foster. I've got Andrew down as leading this, so I do apologise. Thank you. Colin Foster.
Thank you, Councillor Buckingham, and thank you to the committee for inviting us along. Believe it or not, I will have been in Northamptonshire for 4 years in November, and I've been to visit the committee a number of times, and I'd really appreciated the support and the appropriate challenge that we've received, and come here in that spirit today. The report itself is around the Transformation and Efficiencies Board and some of the projects within. Happy to take any questions throughout the item on those areas. But what I'd say, the Transformation Efficiencies Board was a real momentum shift in that both Northamptonshire Council and West Northamptonshire Council agreed to form a Transformation Efficiencies Board that's chaired by the chief executives of each council. So that's Adele, who's over there, and of course Anna Earnshaw from West Northampton. It's a 6-month rotating chair. The idea was that we all know some of the systemic challenges in children's services over the years, many of which were discussed in this committee. And the idea was to say, OK, if we can fix the system, how can we do it? And what would we need to do to make it better? So we've moved from a place of concern and, frankly, suspicion about is the money being spent in the right way. You know, there are challenges in children's services nationally. We are in line with statistical neighbours now in many ways. This is how do we improve the system, because we know, and the benchmarking shows that, I always use the example of Essex, that's got almost twice as many children, young people aged 0 to 17, but have less children in care, and their system costs less than ours does. So that's the direction of travel we need to go on, and a lot of the transformation projects are aimed at addressing that. And the best projects that we can talk through are the ones where they improve outcomes for children, but also generate financial savings, because that's a win-win for everybody. That's absolutely where we would all like to be. And this is in a national context of placements for children who are in care costing somewhere in the region of £25,000 per week, and some authorities paying a lot. That kind of money for a lot of children. We have a systemic approach to how we address that. There's still work to do in that space, but when you go back to 4 years ago, and remember the press article that said Northampton's got the most expensive placements in the country. You know, we're not in that space anymore, but there's still work to do. And a lot of that work to do depends on the infrastructure being built around the system to create better and more space for children in care to live and prevent children coming into care across the board. So that's the idea. So I'm presenting this from NCT perspective, but what it is, it's a wholly owned programme of transformation that includes senior officers from North Northampton and West Northamptonshire councils. So I hope that helps. Context, Chair. On that note, what we'll do, I won't read through the report because it'll take age. I think the question, whenever I've been to the committee, the question and answer session is always the most beneficial for all, including ourselves. So what I'm going to suggest is the other point I should mention, sorry, before I move on, is that what also happened was there was a recognition that some resource support might be needed, and Sarah Reid was seconded into NCT to help support the project management transformation support at senior level. And so I'm going to hand over to Sarah in a moment to talk through some of the projects, and then we'll go into questions. But I don't know if you want to just give us a headline of the project, Sarah, and things. So that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my name's Sarah Reid. I'm Executive Director of Corporate Services at West Northampton Council. And in order to provide some additional capacity and support to the Children's Trust, it was agreed that I'd be seconded in to support with the improvement and transformation work, working very much with both councils as well. So when we started off, following the sort of conversations post last autumn time, there are a number of projects identified by the Children's Trust in terms of improvements. Some very long-term, some very much tactical projects as well. And what really was required at the time was some capacity, some support, some structure, some governance around that, which included the Transformation Board, which has actually worked really well between both councils and DFE and the Children's Trust as well to really have robust business cases, benefits realisation and looking at progress. So that's really where we started from. And there were some very, very simple, straightforward wins. For example, claiming for housing benefits, making sure that the care leavers packages were consistent with the offer for both West and North. So there were some early wins to start off with. And to help put some structure around the programme of support and capacity building within the Children's Trust, we split that by themes. And it's very similar to transformation programmes that are run across councils. So some around procurement and commissioning, some around demand management, some around policy, some around technology, operational efficiency and workforce. So that's really how we've just tried to categorise things as well, because they tend to be general things of improvement. What became very apparent, though, with working with the Trust is really about where does the money sit, or where are the costs. And in essence, the majority of the costs sit with placements. That is the biggest issue around there. And actually, when we started to work with the Trust and deliver some of the programmes, we've also provided capacity in the Trust to help unlock some of the benefits assigned with there, and also to think about how both councils could help the Trust alongside partners to also mitigate some of those arrangements and start to move people out of some of the high-cost placements and further down the track as well. So that has been a big, big piece of work that we've been doing and continues. What I would say as part of that, we've done deep dives into all the analysis of the data, and one of the areas which really stuck out for the Trust has been post-16 and post-18. And for us, that has been something that both councils are now equally working on, to think about accommodation needs and step down, thinking about how to recruit foster carers, thinking about how to move away from unregulated places, and also where care leavers are confident and ready to go into their own homes or into university or college or jobs, thinking about how they can actually move into their own tenancies as well. So that's been a really, really important piece of work. So in terms of the transformation activity, yes, we've been delivering programmes to the T&E board, but at the same time really helping to provide some capacity, and this is a journey, and I would say probably a 3 to 5 year journey, to really get on top of all the places and move things in the right way, because it takes quite a bit of time to set some of those things up. So at the moment, in terms of things I just wanted to really mention, One of the key things, which is under section 5.6, and that's why I put quite a bit of stuff around commissioning and procurement, is thinking about alternative residential accommodation. So that is a key thing for us in terms of foster care is continuing to support young people post 16, post 18, which is really important, which is staying put. There's also work around staying close. So in essence, it's really about having some level of support that helps young people operate in their own accommodation needs. So again, that's really important. And then what we've also been trying to do around that is thinking about both councils looking at alternative provision themselves, which would be better value than the market price at the moment. You've probably seen in the press lots of very expensive, unregulated placements, and that's just due to levels of demand. So that's been a really big piece of work that we've been working on with them. I'd also like to mention the fact that in terms of procuring placements, it is a very difficult market out there. So I think both councils got the assurance through some of the deep dives work we've done that it is a precarious market out there, and there is quite a lot of variation between some of the costs there. And one of the things that, again, is a really obvious thing is about how do you get sustainability in some of those placements. So one of the things we're currently exploring at the moment is a long-term strategic partner to be potential alternative to block contracts as well, where you're buying placements as well. Because if you don't do that, you end up with your children moving outside of West Northants, North Northants, or not having the most appropriate package. So lots of work around that. The third element, though, that again is a really important one, is the work around circles of success. And I know the appendix is in there as well about some of those benefits. And basically, this is about working with children in the care system and really providing some really intensive support to them and their mum and dads or their family members or their networks to try and help them, move out of care more quickly and safely, but also if somebody's in a really expensive residential placement and they would now be really suitable for a foster carer or maybe a kinship where they're living with their auntie or uncle, it's doing that therapeutic support with them to move them down to a lower level one. And from a financial perspective, that is probably the most important element. That's a continuing area. And you can see in the appendix in terms of that will bring benefits for the next couple of years. So what I'm trying to paint a picture here in terms of procurement is having a mixed model, doing a range of different projects, having all councils involved is really important. So that was the first point I wanted to make. And then if you indulge me for 2 minutes, I've got 2 other points to make, just in terms of summary. So the other important thing is, how do you stop demand going into the Children's Trust in the first place? And this has really been the question posed by Adele, Anna, the DFE, about what more could we do in terms of how can we stop the tap? And looking at the data that comes through the Children's Trust, we are having quite a lot of children who are 15, 16, 17, emotional needs also being part of that. So it's thinking, what can we do around some of that demand management? So a lot of work's now going into the early help models in both councils and that preventative approach. So, so there's a family breakdown. Mum might have drug and alcohol issues. That might have an impact on the children. That might then lead them going into care. So that's the bit of work we're both doing with both councils systemically, working with public health as well, and thinking about how do we operate as a system. So that's a really important element as well. And the last bit is around technology. I was pretty shocked when I went into the Children's Trust about the IT systems that were running in terms of managing the work in children's services. It was an archaic system, lots of spreadsheets, and both councils have invested now in Liquid Logic. So that is now starting with implementation by autumn time next year, and that will actually help give members also more assurance about how the workflow is working, how people are doing stuff to the right timetables. It will also develop some benefits around smarter ways of working. So what I would say is, yes, there are a set of projects, which is great, but at the same time, I think the time that's been afforded by having a bit more capacity has also allowed us to think more as a system to drive that improvement as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And just to finish off, Chair, just a couple of points there. The liquid logic system, I mean, I know when I started, the Care First system that was here, nowhere else used it, everywhere had phased it out for liquid logic, and the fact the council are supporting that rollout now is really positive. So that's very helpful. I would also say when we talk about placements, you know, it's all age placements is the challenge, just to be clear. We're looking at all the sections separately, as Sarah said, so we've got to really have a razor sharp focus on that. And the good news is, do you remember the agency workforce narrative about so many agency social workers in Northamptonshire? Those who've been around will remember. You know, we're bucking the trend. We're one of the few in the region where our number of agencies going down and our number of permanent workforce going up. People have got confidence in coming to Northamptonshire now, and I have to say I never even dreamt that would be possible. Yeah, I hoped, but seriously, you know, we're getting lots of people really interested in jobs, so that's a good thing. And the early help stuff that Sarah just mentioned, and our corporate parenting approach as well, working closely with Sharice and Adele on developing that, because the Northamptonshire early help offer is really important, as is the Northamptonshire corporate parenting offer, to address some of the points here. And I know that there's a real positive momentum behind that too. So it feels like we've got the best chance of success that Northamptonshire's had for several years. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've got the first question. So you've agreed for a lot of the early years money to come back to the councils. How's that going to work in reality if and how will they work with family hubs?
Thank you, Chair. That's a really, really good point, because when the initial amount of money was allocated, the 3.2 million, we talked about sort of transformation projects from a trust perspective, but it was really clear that the early help offer was underdeveloped in both North and West Northamptonshire. So we suggested, and in agreement with everybody, that, well, we all were violently agreeing, actually, rather than just our suggestion. But the point being that money was intended to help West and North Northampton develop their early help offer. So the way it integrates is effectively a good early help offer starts in the community with schools, and it's how that wraparound support is given, helping early help assessments to be completed so that families and children can get support at an earlier stage. The challenge here has been a lot of that hasn't existed, therefore the escalation to social care is quicker. And then that's how you get the narrative, we can never get a social worker because they don't meet the threshold of significant harm. But then when children did meet the threshold of significant harm, there hadn't been any work. And I've read some case files for children where, you know, if interventions had been made earlier, they wouldn't be in the care system at all. And it's to develop that. So that's really exciting. So what I thought that also did was it demonstrated that commitment. We weren't kind of going, oh, that's the money, we want all that money. It's like, it's about fixing the system, not just the areas that we have oversight of. I don't know if Sharice wanted to come in on the early help offer.
Yeah, I would like to come in on that. I think that it's fair to say, hi colleagues, good evening, that the offer around early help at the moment feels very kind of reactive and quite statutory based. And I think the work that we need to do is to develop that early help strategy offer for North Northamptonshire, you know, taking into consideration the complexity of needs, but really ensuring that we're understanding what our demography profile is and what we need to address. I think one of the key things for us is about having that early help strategy that really sets out what our strategic objectives and ambitions are based on a really solid needs assessment. But I think there's also an opportunity now to think about a reprioritisation of how we utilise our early help resource. So, as Colin mentioned, there is a risk escalation into statutory services. We know that statutory services are dealing with complex demand. What I haven't seen as well embedded is that wraparound early help offer that's based in our schools, so that team around the school, the team around the community, that still isn't embedded. And I think that now is a really good opportunity for us to take a pause, to do a stock-take analysis of some of those key priority areas. But I think one of the things that I will be really championing and passionately pushing forward is really having that early help model and offer right at that lower end, because I think that's where we're going to have the most opportunity to really intervene at the earliest possible opportunity. So I think that there is still significant amount of work to be done, but I think that we need to reapportion our early help offer right back just above that universal setting so that we're intervening at tier 2. So I think, as Colin said, we need to be jointly considering how we utilise our resources in that context.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for that in-depth. And I think you're right. And options appraisals of where you are, where you need to be, and how you get there. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Next question, Councillor McGriffith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Colin, and also Sarah for the presentation. I think we're making some real good progress, especially around the permanent social workers, and I'm really pleased that Charisse mentioned schools, because they play a huge, important role in this early problem that we have. So that's good. On to the question, anyway. How is the Family Hubs programme progressing, and what has the impact been on the hubs which have already opened? How are we measuring those impacts?
I'll kick off and then is that okay? I think, sorry, I did Councillor Buckingham also mentioned Family Hubs. I apologise. I didn't mention that specifically. So, Charisse mentioned about the tier 2. If you imagine sort of a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, kind of, I don't know what rainbow type of thing. So tier 1's universal, tier 4's statutory social work. Okay, and so what at tier 1 and 2, that's the early help offer that has been less than developed across Northamptonshire. So that's not a Northampton haven't done that. It's for many years it's not been developed. The tier 3 is when families escalate into tier 3. That's where there's resource on the Children's Trust side to do that, and tier 4 is the say statutory social work. So the Family Hub offer definitely is around that tier 1, tier 2 approach, and some of tier 3 certainly. And so what we've seen, for example, the digital offer in Northamptonshire is fabulous, and everyone sort of is in agreement that's a really good approach. So it's how that evolves in that, prioritising Northampton resources to support that tier 1 and tier 2 development of the Family Hubs. I think, is that a fair overview, Charisse? Did you want, yeah? And how's the impact?
I mean, I think that the Family Hub offer is designed to provide that early help support right at the front door of our communities. And it's built upon that kind of one-stop shop offer that is designed to support families on a range of different needs. So the aim is to have a co-location of services across health, across the voluntary sector, across our adults, just to ensure that we are providing that wraparound support package. I think the great thing about our Family Hubs networks is that we will be having that digitalisation front door, which enables families to access that single point of contact and access point so that they're able to get their needs met. But I think that digitalisation front door will enable families to be able to download resources 24/7, have that choice and control, certainly moving beyond that kind of paternalistic type of support where families are actually empowered to access that type of support. So just in terms of progression of the Family Hubs model, I think it's gone well. I think we've got a good infrastructure. I think the trick will be about the sustainability of the Family Hubs going forward beyond March, but I know that there's opportunities for additional funding. And I think that with the Family Hub model, we will start to see a significant downstream of demand. So if we're getting it right with that Family Hub model, that 0 to 5 offer, extending it up to our 19-year-olds with that youth offer, we will start to see that we are getting less families into our statutory services. And that's the ambition, that's the hope with the Family Hub model. I think the next steps of implementation is about embedding that digitalisation front door, but also thinking about the coexistence of our youth services in partnership with our Family Hubs so that we get that whole family approach and partnership model. So I think that the family hubs is a very good implementation, but I think that there's more work to be done around that.
And if I may add, Sharice's absolutely right. And if we're talking in monetary terms, that's where the big money is. That investment in the family hubs offering the tier 1 and tier 2, less children come into statutory social work, less children in care. You know, but it's one of them wins that not only would drive less cost of services, but it improves outcomes for children, which is what it's all about. You know, it really is. That's what we can achieve, isn't it?
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've been supplying systems to local authorities for 30 years now, and for the last 7 or 8 years virtual systems, so I'm a little bit aware of some of these issues. I'm concerned here about the virtual front door. Now, I like the idea, but I'm concerned about the pervasiveness of it. In other words, for people who don't have access to digital technology, what are they going to do when they're in crisis if you're in that sort of situation? And there's a further subsidiary aspect to it. For young people, which I proposed some time ago, it would be a good idea if we issued them with digital connectivity so that they could be drawn in and kept an eye on easier. But the government is now proposing to ban young people from having smartphones. How is that likely to impact this, and how will you handle people who don't have access to digital connectivity?
Yeah, just to I just want to clarify on the front door point, because it's really valid points that are made. The front door to the social care system, i.e. the MASH, would not be virtual. That is with oversight of social work professionals. It should be to make the right threshold decisions. But I think, do you want to come on the
I think that it's a great point, and I think it was a point that was raised, has been raised several times about digital exclusion. So how are we making sure that, you know, the front door is accessible to everyone within the community, particularly our children and families? And I think the first step is assessing, you know, who those digitally excluded communities are. How can we reach them? What are some of the solutions so that we can ensure that there's an accessibility? One of the great things about the family hub networks is making sure that they are culturally diverse, but they're also digitally diverse. So I think for us, it's about ensuring that we have that inclusive strategy and plan of action about how we target certain elements of populations that are not able to access. So what are the other opportunities that we can utilise to ensure that they're engaged and that they're able to access those services? So I think that's another area of work that we need to do around the Family Hub implementation. Yes, it's fantastic to have that digitalisation, but what about those sections of the community that are not going to be able to access that? How can we ensure that they have those devices or have those solutions in place?
Can I ask a follow-up question? Yeah, I totally agree with your assessment. I'm particularly concerned, as I said, about exclusion. What about people who are only able to communicate in a minority language, for instance? That is going to be a problem in the future because there's a growth in that area, and I foresee that we're going to have yet more problems with inability to deliver services to that sort of person, particularly if we have them focused towards a particular area. So say you've got one translator in the county for a particular language. What about all of the other hubs?
And I think that this is a really excellent point. And I think, you know, I go back to the fundamentals. You know, our ambition, our driver is around inclusivity, it's around equity, it's ensuring that all of our communities, culturally, racially, gender diverse, feel that they have accessibility to our family hubs. And I think one of the areas that we're looking at is how do we communicate and engage with those communities that you're describing. We know that we've had a significant influx in different communities migrating into North Northamptonshire. So how do we serve those particular communities? So one of the things that we are looking at implementing is, for example, around our Family Hub offer. For those individuals that do have smartphones, they will be able to download the timetables for those particular hubs, not just written in English language, but having that multilingual opportunity. So if you're someone from any community, you will be able to translate that offer into your mother tongue language. And I think it's those sorts of things that we need to be thinking about in terms of how we ensure that every aspect of our community, regardless of what your background is able to access those hubs. And this was something that I was discussing with Councillor Edwards this morning about that kind of multilingual, multi-channel engagement and communication plan with our community.
No. A small, concise one, Councillor
Just a small
Mercer.
one. I was going to suggest that perhaps having an interlinked Zoom network or Teams network between the hubs, so that if someone comes into one hub, speaks a particular language, you can zoom them through to one of the other hubs where there's someone who can communicate directly with them in that language. So if you have a telephone directory, if you like, of different Zoom sessions where you can get to different languages, it might allow you to communicate in a more friendly manner with some of the minorities.
Yeah.
I said it was a short one.
Thank you very much,
It's a point well made, thank you.
Councillor Scott Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think we'd all agree that the COVID lockdowns had a huge detrimental effect on the cohort of children. How can Family Hubs support families and schools in improving this situation?
Yeah, of course. So what we're seeing, the level of complexity of need across the country is unprecedented post-COVID. We particularly, again, I've often said I get worried about Northamptonshire if we're outside of what's happening nationally. It doesn't mean what's happening nationally is okay. And there is a rise of 14 to 16-year-old young people coming into the care system with that high complexity of need, you know, a lot of whom were, you know, in their formative, adolescent, early teenage years during lockdown. And you know, that's the way socially interact, the impact on mental health, etc., has led to significant complexity. So yes, it's having an impact on some of the more complex placements, of course, which cost more, but they need to meet the needs of the child are in that cohort of young people coming into the care system. So I think that segs nicely into what the Family Hub will do in that perspective.
I think it comes, I think, you know, a great point well made, and I think it comes back down to that point that I made fundamentally at the beginning. We need to have that robust, coordinated early help offer that wraps around our localities, that wraps around our local communities, that wraps around our schools. And I think that's where we're going to see that significant difference happening. What we do have at the moment, as Colin described, is an upward trajectory in demand in the numbers of children coming into care. We have high numbers of children that are electively home educated, so home educated at the moment. We've also got lack of sufficiency and high demand in terms of school places. So what I'm painting the picture of and what I'm exemplifying is a very complex demand picture, which means that we have to do something radically different. I think more of the same is not an option, which is why I'm saying that early intervention, we know, has the best results for families. It's less intrusive, it's more respectful, it gives power back to our families rather than having this dependency on statutory services. And if we think about intergenerational outcomes and life chances, if we're intervening early, we have much more of an impact and a chance of diverting those children to coming into statutory services. So I think, again, there's a strong, compelling argument about our early help offer in North Northamptonshire, it being innovative, it being focused on radical solutions, because one of the things that concerns me and probably keeps me up sometimes at night is when I leave here in the evening, I see many children in Corby town centre, and I just think, are one of those children, one of those kids that are out of school. And actually, we need to do better. We know that we've got some way to go. But I think that investment, both corporately, politically, and goodwill in early help, I think can change the course of a child's life. And that's where I want to focus my ambition and attention. Thank you.
I completely agree, Sharice, and I think that vision is exactly the right vision. And it's difficult in an improvement journey. I cited Essex earlier because it's that difficult place of we need to invest in early intervention, but we can't disinvest in the top end because that's where the pressures are. And then ultimately, it's been shown a number of authorities over the years, it's not tons of years, it's in 2 to 3 years that will start to then shift. And then what happens is the statutory services in the trust, for example, in this context, reduce, therefore it costs less, and that money can move into the thing. But you'd almost need to double run it for a few years to get it. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's, and I would also add that I did hear from another authority area, not Northamptonshire, in a meeting today. Elective home education is the right of any parent to electively home educate their child. That was set in the law around. There was a lobby called Education Otherwise that pushed for that to be in the law. Because that was a group of parents that were mobilised that supported their children outside of the school setting with education. However, there is a decreasing number of families that are choosing to electively home educate their child without necessarily that education support network. And what I found out today in one area in our region is that there's been some quite significant antisocial behaviour instances, like around lunchtime. Because children are not in school, but they're legally not in school because they're electively home educated, which a parent has the right to do. But that's a bit of a worrying trend.
Can I just finalise on that point, because I think it's really important in terms of elective home education and some parents saying that they're choosing to home educate their child because they don't feel that the school is meeting their child's needs. And I think the two overriding reasons that we are getting around elective home education, because we've done a deep dive into this to understand what is the reasons why we have high numbers, is one, dissatisfaction with the school infrastructure, and second, around mental health and well-being. So I think there is work to be done to understand the complexity, to also understand what schools are offering in that space. Because if we are saying that parents are being forced in some occasions, this is when I've done parent and carer workshops, I need to hear the hard stuff, because it's only then that you can start to make changes. When they're saying that the mental health and well-being offer in schools is not always suitable, we need to be finding out why and what's the reasons, what else can we commission, where are the gaps, where is it working well. So I think that this is the commitment that we need to be thinking about. It's that whole system response that I spoke about to ensure that we have credible, viable school environments that enable our children to thrive.
Thank you very much. And as it was explained to me today, electively homeschooling isn't always electively, and you need to understand that. So thank you for that. My next question is, at the last meeting that the Trust attended last year, the issue of invoicing partners was raised. Has this now improved, and what impact is it having on the budget?
Okay. So the question that was raised previously was in relation to contributions from health and also contributions from education. This is where the joint funding of some of the most complex children and the complex placements, there is always a health, education and social care aspect. At the end of the financial year, we reported that there was still 3.2 million outstanding. We received just over 3 million from health on that contribution. To put that into context, when the trust came into being in November 2020, the contributions from health for joint funded placements was 656,000, At the end of the forecast, the end of the 24-25 financial year, that's 4.7 million. And that has been a real challenge, and some of the work that's been put in place for the joint funding panel, the multi-agency resource panels that we're putting in place to look at these individual needs, to making sure that each partner is paying the right amount for the services that have been provided. So that is now fully resolved. The historic debt is fully resolved. That was deemed to be unrecoverable at certain places through 23-24. We did a lot of intensive sort of brokerage work, and that funding has been received and is now within the bank account of the Trust.
Thanks, Andrew. And I would add, just in the last meeting, Chair, for me, that was in the context of the press story in 2019 that said Northampton's got the most expensive placements in the country. And if you recall, said one of the key reasons is if you're not getting partnership contributions, of course they're going to be the most expensive. So people that say placements are really expensive, you know, it's how we manage the market, as we've said earlier, and how we build better provision. And it's also making sure we stand together to make sure there's the right contributions to those costs. So it's still a journey in my view. We're not where we would be, but I would ask that the committee recognise that journey from where, you know, from 3 to 6 figures to 4.7 million.
Thank you, and well done for the hard work on that. Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that has the board identified KPIs to track its work and need for the improvement? What kind of KPIs we are going to use here?
So there are KPIs in the contracts between the council and the trust, but one of the challenges in children's services is, you know, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it and making it better. One of the challenges is the level, the number of indicators that you have to look at to sense whether a system's working or not are significant, and they can't just be monitored in a small basket of KPIs. So now both the new Director of Children's Services, Charisse, and lead member in Scott are invited to the Policy, Performance and Quality Committee of the Trust, because we don't want it to be a secret. We work together to have that quality oversight of practice. So, and then if there are any sort of underlying concerns, then they could be transferred from there through to the contractual management process, which is a much better way of overseeing the effectiveness of the impact. But if you were to say, as a result of transformation, what are the key things we should see? The key things we should see are, A, less referrals coming into the MASH. You know, that's the social care front door. We should see a reduction in the number of children in care. We should see an increase in the number of early help assessments that are completed by partners. Currently, that's really low in some partnership areas. I have to say there are some schools in North Northamptonshire that do that really well as well. So, you know, it's how we get that embedded across the system. So they're the types of indicators you would want to see. And ultimately, that would then have a knock-on financial benefit of a reduction in finances, and all the projects that are in place, well, all the activity that's in place actually is all part of the medium-term financial strategy now, and over the next 3 to 5 years that does show a reduction, providing we can deliver the projects that are in train.
Simply, how frequently we are going to publish these KPIs?
So the regular update reports on the projects will go to the Transformation Efficiencies Board, that update on how we're doing, and, you know, through the lens of each project. Yeah.
Can I just add in that we are adding in, you know, that extra quality assurance and scrutiny. So every project that comes through the Transformation and Efficiency Board, we are asking for that benefit realisation, so that we're really clear about what are the short-term, medium-term, longitudinal benefits to any transformational activity that we're doing, so that we're ensuring that A, there's a return on investment, there's second, an improvement in outcomes, and as we said, we would want to see a reduction in our care demography. I think we've got roughly around 370 children that are in care at the moment. So we would want to see that reduction happening. But I think that it's just to assure corporate scrutiny that we are looking at that benefit realisation, and that we're not just, investing in transformational activity just for the sake of it. It really is done with that. We're introducing that more kind of rigorous check, that what is the benefits that are going to have to the wider system, but most fundamentally to children and young people.
And if it helps as well, Chair, I agree, that's absolutely right. And just from the setup of the Transformation Efficiencies Board, it's three-way discussion. So it's not trust what you're doing, it's because also there's the early help activity in there as well that's funded through that. So it's benefit realisation of that too. So it's all three parties coming together to say what the benefit realisation of the investment is. That's what should be happening, if that gives any assurance. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, can you quantify this short-term, medium-term, and long-term? When you say short-term, long-term, medium-term, so...
It's a good question, and I guess we're getting into more granularity. So in terms of our transformation and efficiencies projects that we discussed, these are in line with, how we're looking to reduce that placement population. These are contracted, I believe, to next year, 2020, I think it's 2025. But I guess when we're talking about short-term, medium-term, long-term, we're thinking about anything. Short-term is sort of your 0 to 6 months. Your medium-term is that kind of 6 to 12 months. And then that kind of longitudinal oversight is that kind of 12 to 24 months. That's how we would be wanting to evaluate. And I guess the other layer is that if we are not identifying that we are having that benefit realisation from some of the investment that we are making into our transformational activity, my question would be, well, why are we continuing to deliver this particular project if it's not reaching the necessary outcomes? So I think where we need to move to, which I think we are moving to with the Transformation Efficiency Board, is having those much more robust checks and balances, having that scrutiny oversight, ensuring that we do have those regular performance reports so that we know that we understand the trajectory for the cohort, we know where some of the reductions are happening, we know where some of those outcomes are. So I think that will help us to have a really strong quality assurance oversight to what we are investing, because it's quite a substantive investment. But we know that the arena that we're operating within is a complex one. It's a volatile one. It's constantly fluctuating. But I think having that quality assurance and monitoring infrastructure is going to enable us to ensure that we're getting the benefits, but also that return on investment. So we're setting clear timeframes for those projects.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Just very quickly, thank you, Chair. Colin, this is good work that's coming through. How's it going with the spreading the word, as it were? How are you finding going out to, let's say, schools and such like, to bring them on board to be an active part of the partnership?
Well, thank you for your kind words, Councillor Roberts. There's a few people here been on the journey for all these years, and it's really appreciated. I think the big step change that will happen for North Northants in particular, is like stable leadership team. Sharice's permanent DCS supporting in that school conversation. There's a lot of honesty now in the school conversation. Things aren't exactly right how schools would like them at the moment. Just as Councillor Buckingham alluded to, some electively home education perhaps you might want to electively home educate, which is not helpful and not supportive of children. So the message is getting out there when the early help strategy evolves, and I think this is how we can support you even further as a system. I think that'll really take us to another level. But I think there is more trust and confidence in social work practice now. There are still frustrations out there. We can't get a social worker, but then if the situation doesn't require statutory intervention, then as a system we shouldn't be doing it, and that's where the early help, and that's what schools need support to get there. But no, there's a high level of honesty. It's landing well, and the best comment I had off a school recently was do you know what? This last 6 months is the first time where every child open to social care has had the same social worker. And we know where things were. And that was really powerful, quite emotional.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And like has been said, I want to see kids at school. Kids are safer at school. And also, with families having kids at school, it actually leads to stronger homes. And that's another thing that we should be promoting. And that is strong families, strong homes, and kids back in the classroom.
Thank you. So you've, I know, Sarah, you talked earlier about the demand management, the work redesigning MASH. You talked about accommodation going forward, and wondered whether or not you'd considered inviting some form of foyer in, because I know that they work really well with young people sort of moving out of care. And so, yeah, I get the demand management, and it was just that sort of wording which sort of threw me. How can you manage demand effectively? But also MASH has been a concern for a wee while. So those things, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, one of the most encouraging developments over the last 12 months was the focused visit on MASH and the front door back in by Ofsted. I think report was published late last year, and that they said the front doors were the most stable it's been in years, and they were complimentary about the approach. There was still some work to do with partners in terms of consent and how consent operates in the sort of safeguarding space. But that's a real positive shift, I have to say, compared to where it was. And I think as we evolve the local early help, sorry to keep referring to it, but as we evolve the local early help offers, then a lot of that demand and the pressures will be supported there, so they won't be coming to the front door. The MASH front door. Sorry, lots of front doors. Going to the MASH. Does that help? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Marks. No question.
It is noted the aim is to get to good in terms of ILACs. If an inspection was to take place now, what do you think the rating would be? How long do you think it would take to get to good? Capital G.
Wow. If I could answer that question. I think... So, inspection of local authority children's services, the ILACs inspection, that's the graded inspection. So we're anticipating the grade inspection early 2026. So the last inspection was October 2022, when we moved from inadequate to requires improvement to be good. There was still lots of areas for development in that. What I can say is that some of those areas of development were in the front door. So what Ofsted doing between the judgments is to do these focus visits. So well worth a read, the one on the front door, because that says, it makes statements like the workforce is the most stable it's been in years, decision making is appropriate. So that addresses some of the things that were in the requires improvement judgment in the previous one. We've just had a focus visit in Northamptonshire on care leavers. That report's due to be published on the 31st of October, and it's the first inspection Sharice and I have done together. And the great thing about it was about care leavers, and care leavers did the opening presentation, and they were great, weren't they? They were great. And so I can't say exactly what was in that report, as it's obviously embargoed, but I think it's appropriate to say that the themes continued on from the last focus visit in terms of improvement. So there's one more focus visit early next year. We don't know the dates. Obviously, you find out a week before. and that's in West Northants around children in care. But like the care leavers one for North Northants, there's a lot of similarities. So that gives a good window into both councils, I think. So so that'll be early next year. We'll wait and see what that says. And if that continues the narrative, then, you know, for the 2026 inspection, we would hope that we would get... I can't say what you want me to say because it wouldn't be the right thing to do, particularly as it's a public meeting with an Ofsted may read it. So, but as it stands, our trajectory is going in the right direction, and all the data stats suggest that. And so when I've cited Essex a few times, but anyone that in the section in the mid-2000s will know that no one wanted to go to Essex because it was, in inverted commas, an absolute basket case. No one wanted to go. But they're now outstanding and one of the best authorities in the country. You know, Northamptonshire had a very similar reputation during the 2010s. And, you know, you know, everyone has to go on a journey of improvement. So far, it's travelling with hope. I think, is that fair, Sheree? Yeah, thank you. No.
Travelling with hope and optimism.
Hope and optimism.
And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I welcome all your answers. Thank you for putting yourself under the microscope for us. I have a number of recommendations that we note the content of the report and the progress that's being made to date. The committee also acknowledged the good direction of travel. The transformation and efficiency programme is having, you know, from a low base, you're moving at pace. And also to ask for a further report at the February 2025 meeting of the committee. Are you all, I need a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Marks. And are we all happy with that? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. You can leave should you wish to. In which case, would you like a quick 5-minute break whilst they leave the room? Thank you very much. Okay, everybody. If we can all move back in, because we've still got a way to go. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 6, Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Report. And I'm handing over to Simon for your input, please.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair. So today, just bringing the annual updates from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. They produce a letter each year to local authorities detailing the decisions they've made around complaints and adult care providers within England. So the annual letter confirms what complaints about our organisation have been investigated and their independent outcomes. Section 2 of the report sets out the total cases that the LGSCO investigated last year in relation to Northamptonshire Council. And upon reviewing the table, there were 101 cases in 2023 to 2024, which is up from the 64 cases that we had the year before. Section 2.2 of the report shows the changes by service area and the volume upheld by each area, of which the total cases was 17, so approximately 16%. The LGSCO chair was newly appointed in February 2024, and in reviewing the national picture from last year, made observations on the changes to the complaint handling code to aid support and service improvement, and also highlight the financial challenges local authorities face. The LGSCO noted a delay in responses being received in a timely manner for information requests, citing that 73% of the council's responses were late. Whilst the LGSCO welcomed that the council agreed to and implemented recommendations made in 15 cases, there was some disappointments that over half of these cases were not completed within the agreed timescales. Section 5.10 summarises the individual cases and the remedies agreed, with Section 5.11 summarising these in further detail. It's just worth noting at this point as well that there are 16 of the 17 cases displayed. One's been omitted for confidentiality reasons. Within the report, there's a couple of hyperlinks which allow members and the public to view the report online, as well as also review the letter that has been sent into the authority. In terms of summary from the letter and bringing that to the committee today, it's important, and I'm sure this will be shared with the room, it is disappointing to see similar themes to last year in the letter that have been highlighted. But there's definite progress that's being made with the service. And just to highlight that the policies and the ways of working alongside the updated Ombudsman complaint handling codes that have been introduced as part of the review that was done last October have started to be implemented and have been through the exec process as well for sign-off. As recent as yesterday went live on our website and for our officers to implement as well. This will also then launch with a digital case management system as we progress into the winter months, which will ensure that we can also automate some chases, but also support officers with their complaint handling. So in summary, there are some green shoots ahead, and going forward, that should be reflected in the subsequent letters. I'll pause at this point for any immediate questions. I'm happy to go through the changes that have also been brought into the handling code in detail if the room so wishes.
Councillor North.
Thank you, Chair. You responded to it in your presentation or your comments, but I'll ask anyway. I'll just pick up on, obviously the report did mention the response timelines, and obviously it was quite critical in places, and obviously some of those were detailed. I appreciate your comments, and obviously you've got 2 appendices in there. I do note the Appendix B has been in place since the council was formed on 1st of April 21, but obviously the policy has been in place. And I know you obviously mentioned the case management system, but what I'm concerned about, Chair, is obviously that policy hasn't been adhered to. it's okay having a policy, but you actually do have to adhere to it. And I haven't really seen an explanation of why we haven't been following the policy we had in place, which has been in place since the council started. And as we've seen, Chair, obviously the complaints have actually increased. So, I mean, is it a fact of the IT system, or we've just not been on top in relation to what I'm trying to get to, Chair, is in relation to why, if we've had the policy in place since the council started, did we have these complaints for so long being unresolved?
Thank you. So to just address the first thing around the increase in complaints, I think we need to separate the two components in terms of the volume received versus the timely response to them. It is considered by the Ombudsman's healthy for us to have a level of complaints. That does demonstrate that our tenants and our customers are able to escalate issues that they come across, whether that's at stage 1, stage 2, or Ombudsman level. It would, if we were seeing a very low amount of complaints, we would potentially be looking at the fact whether or not, residents and customers are able to actually exercise, disapproval with something that's in place. In terms of, the policy itself and where it's been in place, yes, this policy has been in place since vesting day, but this is an update to that policy. This is version 2, and it's incorporated a number of the statutory code changes to the complaint handling process. So one of the key components that has changed is around the timeframes for complaints to be handled. But I think that's something we need to react to in terms of actually how we set up our teams. But I think most critically, and this is where we are really focusing on in terms of our culture, is it's made it mandatory around learning logs and how we learn from complaints and how we track our learnings from complaints, as opposed to going through a cycle of going through writing a letter, putting it into a folder, going through the same process again and again. Ultimately, the volume of complaints that come through are driven by some national factors as much as they are local factors. So, that can be dependent at certain times of year when we see an intense volume and the pressure that puts on services. So if we were to take a snapshot from the recent month of September, there was a huge pressure on our school admissions and transport services. That would have been reflected in calls coming through to our customer contact centres. It would have been reflective in the member inquiry process. It was reflective in the MP's inquiries process, and it also then came through on the complaints process. So all those inquiries are coming through those multiple contact channels. That does put that pressure on that team. The team's only only resourced and finite to a certain point. So you do get into a position sometimes where those complaints do fall out of that agreed statutory SLA. Now, that's not excusing that, but hopefully it goes some way to explain how that can occur.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for that response. I mean, obviously, we didn't see the track changes, so obviously I didn't know what was different from version 1 to version 2. I appreciate the peaks and troughs, but obviously, hopefully, as a council, we can have the resources available to actually predict and see that coming, like school admissions time. So, with the new system in place coming through, hopefully, we should see a reduction in the number, either a half-yearly report or this time next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And that's just also to say that we understand that sometimes the team have got to pass out the complaint to a department and then wait for departments to come back, and just aware of that relationship build up. It's been a little bit slow, but aware of that. So my question is, the council, obviously the report has said that in a number of cases, due to failures, there's been quite a bit of compensation paid out, which is a concern for us. As we can't have people falling through the gaps, will the new case management system make that easier so that, they can respond both timeliness and in a better way, I think.
Thank you, Chair. And just to go back to a point for Councillor North around some of the key changes in the process. One of the biggest changes we will see is the complaints handling SLA, so that's the service level agreement, has gone from 20 days down to 10 working days, as well as the learning logs being the statutory component of that as well. This was done in a joint consultation with the Housing Ombudsman Service last November and was concluded in February of this year. Those two ombudsman authorities made a decision to go separate ways, but aligned their principles, which is why we've had a review of our policy. The Housing Ombudsman changes came in statute on the 1st of April this year, so the Housing Service have already been conforming to those new ways of the Complaint Handling Code. In terms of the LGSCO Complaint Handling Code, we had, as an authority, 2 years to adopt those principles. We wanted to do that as soon as possible, and as we were reviewing those customer experience policies within this financial year anyway, we saw the opportunity to do that as soon as they were reviewed and published, which is probably the key components that have changed in there. In terms of how some of the other changes within that policy, we have reviewed the way in which it has been written, the way in which it's prescribed and described in terms of examples, but essentially a lot of the process setting out will be the same. And Chair, to lead on to your point around the allocation time, previously that was allowing officers 3 working days to do that. That has now gone in line with the Ombudsman's codes of 5 working days. So that does allow for some of those pressures when those volumes do hit, but also the size of our organisation as well. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to find the officer concerned with in a timely manner as well, so that has helped. Then, Chair, just to move on to your questions around the digital case management system, this will absolutely help officers. So some of the key benefits of this will be automation chases within the system. So at the moment, my team that are responsible for all these cases do so manually, and if they're doing all those case allocations manually, the time actually aside to do that support and also that chasing is very minimal. So it's very reactive. The digital system will take that away and enable those officers to do that support better, which is really welcomed. Equally as well, we'll be able to get better reporting from it. So I know that when we are speaking to services about cases that are overdue, it does come back as quite a common theme that they've already done them. And that's because where we work off different infrastructures and we also have those on a shared spreadsheet within teams, it can also corrupt the file that we're operating off, and that can cause some frustration for the teams, especially if they're in high receipt of those complaints. So another one of those benefits we are addressing in that sense is it's going to be far more reliable in that reporting aspect, and that will also take the pressure away from those teams to avoid that duplication as well. The remedy process that we have, the policy that we brought in, which is an internal policy for officers as part of a relaunch around how we do feedback handling, will go some way to address the financial amount that we have paid to customers in general, not just in the last 12 months. What we are focusing on as part of that policy isn't just necessarily financial remedy, but non-financial remedy. And the key part of that is making sure that we answer inquiries at the first point and offer that remedy at the first point, and do so in a very consistent way, which is how these toolkits have been built in. And hopefully when you review that remedy policy, you can see how that's going to support those officers as well. So yeah, we're on again, to sort of quote Colin previously, we are on a journey with this, and we will start to see the benefits, and hopefully the officers who are seeing quite high volumes will start to feel the benefits of it as well, because they do need that support. We can't just say 1 day, 20 days, 10 days the next, and hope for that to change straight away, because that isn't going to be possible. And we've seen that already with housing, and they've already started to adjust to a different way of working to help facilitate that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roberts.
Yes, recommendations for improvement. That's how we better ourselves, I know. How do you implement and how do you monitor to ensure that it's having a positive effect on the whole of the system?
Thank you. It's a really good question. Something that we've thought about as part of our project. So in itself, the project came from the fact we wanted to go to a digital case management system, but we didn't just stop there. We thought, how do we improve that whole experience for the customer, as well as how the officers also feel empowered to do to deal with feedback and also handle complaints. In terms and sort of bringing that all together, we've looked at our KPIs and our MPIs, and we've actually increased them so we can start to bring that more into the discussion points. So again, at future scrutinies and also our quarterly reporting, we'll now be able to see and track those sort of sub-level agreements. But it's not just saying, you know, this is the amount we've received and this is the amount we've done. We are looking at elements like, well, how many learning logs have we received and what percentage is that versus the amount of complaints that have been handed in. So we're actually putting that into more of a focus. And that won't just be to the complaints that we deal with, that will also be to deal with any complaints that come via MP offices and also members as well. We'll be having a very far-reaching review of that so we can start to learn from it. Because ultimately we want to be able to say to a service, if you're dealing with 30 complaints and all related to a similar issue, rather than just continue that coming through, how do we stop it and how do we correct what we're doing? Because fundamentally there's obviously something in our process that isn't right. At the moment there isn't the opportunity to do that because of the volume and the way that the system is set up. It's quite manual. So by able to put these changes in place and give that breathing space to say, let's have renewed focus, we will start to see it, and we are tracking it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Scott Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think your answer leans quite nicely into this question. Can you explain how does the lessons learned process work within teams, and suggest that it may be helpful if future reports to the committee contains examples of learning along with details of stage 1 and stage 2 complaints?
Thank you. So yes, the moment the learning logs themselves, in terms of what that detail is, it's imperative that the services track those identified learnings, because they're going to be either leading into their policy or process changes. It's going to lead into their communication with their officers, and also it's going to, if they own it, they're going to feel more empowered to change it. I think if we take that solely away from them, and we're the ones that sort of set that message and tone, it doesn't sit right, and we're also not the service experts in which to deliver it. That said, though, the feedback team will support in monitoring that progress, and as I just alluded to, one of the MPIs we're putting in is titled Percentage of Learning Logs Returned within the SLA of that complaints handling code. We'll be tracking the return rate, but also the quality of those learning logs, and then just be linking in with those service leads to how we're progressing with those identified changes. Then moving into more of that awareness of what we've done, we're looking at an approach which is quite common within the customer service sector around you said we did. So if we're seeing an element of complaints originating from our garden waste service, for example, we can say, actually, we had the feedback on this, we've listened and we've done this. And that will be something that sits within the forum of our complaints page on the website as well. But, with those themes we'll pull through, we absolutely can. We'll make sure we bring those through some case studies examples.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Griffiths.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have great sympathy for our officers that have to deal with complaints and freedom of information requests as well, because that puts a huge pressure on us. You know, a simple subject access request can take many, many hours. Confession time, Madam Chairman. As a former council leader, I still get the reports broken down by council of complaints, whether it be on planning, housing, social care, whatever. I haven't told anybody yet that I'm no longer in that role. But they're extremely useful. I'm sure Councillor North probably gets them as well. They're extremely useful, and Northamptonshire Council very seldom appears on them, to be fair. But I realise that is only one aspect of complaints. But the report details the complaints that are recorded against the council. How are compliments reported? And again, what learning can we gain from them? And I would love to see the situation where we get as many compliments as we get complaints. I'm sure you would as well.
Thank you, and thank you very much for also pointing that out. So, I said we're talking about the whole feedback experience. So, fundamentally, in terms of volume, we do focus on the complaint aspect because that is where we need to be making a difference to our local residents and customers and tenants. But you're absolutely right. We have done some work underneath this project around compliments and comments. So one of the immediate changes, some may notice to the website is previously where we stipulate the differences between what a comment, compliment and complaint is. There wasn't a button underneath that said make a compliment. It just said make a complaint. So we told you what a comment and compliment is, but we haven't really actually told you how to even do it. So we've now separated that out. So there's a button that says make a complaint, and there's a button that says make a comment and a compliment. So hopefully what that will do, and it just automatically will just drive better volumes coming through that forum. We are then going to be, again, as we can do the reporting, it all goes into the same database. We'll be making sure we do the same focus on the compliments received as we do with the complaints received, because we need to make sure that our teams are empowered. And whilst we know we have work to do with the volume of complaints and the themes that come through, we should equally be just as quick to highlight the great work that the officers do. So we do share those with the teams at the moment, but again, it's done very, very manually. It's not high volume that comes through, and I think when we looked at the platform, that was quite an obvious reason potentially why. So hopefully we will start to see some traction on that as well.
I've got Councillor Mercer, Councillor North and Councillor Pendy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm interested in the case management system that you are proposing to implement. The reason I say that is because about a couple of decades ago, my company tendered for a public sector case management system. We didn't get the contract, even though we had an off-the-shelf system that did everything that they wanted. They went for a multinationals offer, which was literally 100 times as expensive as our off-the-shelf working system. The 100 times as expensive system never properly worked and was abandoned in the end after it cost $3 million. The reason I mention this is because the public sector has a nasty habit of assuming that because a local small company is offering something at a low price, it's low quality, and that's not always the case. The multinational was producing the piece of rubbish and it never worked, and the public sector body got itself into a deep mess which it needn't have been in. So I'm just interested to know what process you will be following to provide yourself with an automated case management system.
Thank you. So we already have one. It came through as part of the procurement with our CRM system, which was procured through a company called PlaceCube. So PlaceCube is a digital platform which has certain modules which come as part of that annual subscription. The case management module was one of those modules that's on there as part of that. So we've got a one-off cost in which to build it, and which is, to get some developers to do the hooking that we need with the different systems and integrations, and also reporting on that. But once those costs are paid, there is no ongoing costs outside of that. They're incorporated into the ongoing subscription costs with the original contract. I'm
very pleased to hear that, because the public body I was referring to, when you take into account inflation, probably spent about $8 million on a product that never worked when they could have had an off-the-shelf working one for peanuts.
Thank you. And I know that they're going to be looking at procurement and social value at some stage in the future. So keep those things in mind. Councillor North.
Thanks, Chair. As I mentioned earlier, obviously the number of complaints increased on last year, and I appreciate the answers to that. And some of those complaints are very publicly profiled as well. I appreciate we do need complaints, but obviously some of those haven't been helpful in relation to the public or to the residents. I appreciate the answers, obviously with the case management system, and obviously the procedures that have changed in relation to timing of dealing with those. And as I said in my follow-up to the response, hopefully there should be a reduction. I don't know if they're in our KPIs, because I can't remember offhand, but I'm just wondering, Chair, whether it would be useful if we had a report back on the interim, just in relation to what we've introduced, see if it is making a difference before this council finishes next April? I appreciate it just says future reports in the recommendations, but because of the changes that are significant we've had, and because of obviously the number of complaints, and as I said, some of them high profile, I actually think, if possible, it would be appropriate to have an interim report on the back of seeing how they are actually doing. I don't know if that I need to include that in the recommendations, or that could be just acceptable as an agreement.
Thank you, and we'll go to that when we look into our working paper later, and it could be a briefing note. Ask you to bring back a briefing note in the future. So, Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Chair. Behind these complaints, there must be like a system, team, or individuals. So you talk about the system, how you're improving that. You talk how you learn from this mistake. So my question is that how many chance an individual or an officer get to improve his performance before you or manager take any strict action?
Thank you. I don't actually know if I'll be able to give an answer that's going to really satisfy that question, unfortunately, because it's far more complicated than saying it's an officer or an individual that's caused a complaint. There are many factors which can lead to a complaint being raised, which could be against a policy, a procedure. It could be against other external factors that have impacted on the team's ability to do their role. I feel that there's potentially, where we're talking about an officer making a decision or doing something inadvertently that's impacted the customer directly, from seeing these complaints coming through, that's usually few and far between. We do have officers empowered to make decisions, which can sometimes lead to dissatisfaction, but they're never done with the intent, I would say, would constitute an in-depth review of their performance in that vein. That doesn't say that doesn't happen in certain cases, but they would certainly be the few and far between of them. I think there's more of a, when we're looking at the complaints that we're receiving as an organisation, there's an element of collective responsibility within the service about how a procedure or a process has been enacted, rather than potentially individuals. Hopefully that helps. I think it would be very difficult for me to sort of say how an individual service is managing a performance of an individual, because that is far more complicated and complex than just using that for complaint measurement, I think.
Very quickly.
So don't we have any kind of appraisal in council where we appraise? So how do we appraise if we don't know their job?
We do have appraisal systems within the council, but I think we need to distinguish the difference between an individual's performance and a performance of a service. So when we're looking at complaints, primarily they are around a service or a procedure that we've done. There is a performance behind that, and there may well be something that has triggered that, which would mean that an individual is managed. But we wouldn't be looking at that at this level in terms of a review. That is for the individual and that line manager to have that interaction. We are looking at the service improvements. It's the customer experience we're looking to improve. The experience or the performance of an individual is down to a line manager and an officer, and we trust that to happen, and it does happen because there's a framework within the council to do that.
Thank you very much for that answer, and I agree. It's that split between the strategic, which we need to be looking at and focusing on. I have a number of recommendations for you. The first is to note the context and recommendations of the Local Government Social Care Ombudsman annual review letter. The future reports contain examples of learning from complaints and details of the stage 1 and stage 2 complaints. And then Councillor North has asked whether or not you will bring a briefing paper back on those bits that he's asked for. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. With the last recommendation, I can certainly look at bringing something at a later point. The only thing I would say, Councillor North, is the decisions that the Ombudsman does within a financial year, they usually take quite a delay in terms of us getting that reporting through. So that's why the letter comes out usually around July, and we're reporting it through the executive and the scrutiny process around October time. So just to give an indication now, we had, tracking at this point in time last year, before Q4, around 49 that had come through. We're currently sitting on 4. So it just we may not get that necessary, that real overview at that point. Maybe, I'm more than happy to do it, but it might just need to be a bit of a footnote to say this number may increase. So it's not a bit of a shock later down the line when those cases are then decided on, because some of them are far more complex and do have a bit more of a delay in terms of the outcome, which is why we've really focused on our officers doing that remedy at the first point, because if a customer does go through a stage 1, stage 2 process, an ombudsman process, it can take a long time. But absolutely more than happy to bring that forward.
I know that Councillor North wants to come back quite quickly on this one, and then I have Councillor Griffiths.
No, Chair, I fully understand the response again, but I mean, obviously this is scrutiny. There's still a number of complaints, quite a little public interest in relation to that. So if we could have an interim report, that would be helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths.
I don't see the need to rush to do it within the term of this council. I mean, the council isn't going anywhere, to the best of my knowledge anyway. Whether it be April, whether it be June or July, I would rather have the information fully at the relevant time, to be quite honest with you, than limit it to the time of the duration of the council's term of office, if you want them for a better term.
Yeah, and we do have the KPIs that come through as well, so we can monitor through the KPIs, but I understand where it's coming from. Do we know when we're going to get the Housing Ombudsman report? Will that come alongside this one? Will that one go to a different board?
I believe that goes to a different board, and that's usually through Suzanne Jackson and that team. I will double check that though. That's not something usually we bring into this forum. It goes through the housing board process. But again, we can have something that kind of gives, like this paper has done, and the paper around the policies coming out, it does make reference to it because there is a lot of alignment with the complaint handling codes. And just to offer us potentially a way in which we can incorporate an interim update, I believe that there's a request to do a service-wide update to this same committee. We could incorporate something in there around a brief overview of the complaints, because that is something that falls within that customer service remit. So we can incorporate the two, is what I'm trying to suggest there.
That would be an absolutely wonderful suggestion. Thank you, Simon. So you have the recommendations. Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Mercer, Councillor Marks. Are we all in favour of that? Thank you very much. That's passed. Moving on, indicative budget timeline for the scrutiny process 25-26 update. This is Mark Dickinson. So
thanks very much, Chair.
Passing over to you.
Thanks very much. So the purpose of this report is to consider the 25-26 budget setting process and scrutiny arrangements for this council. The report provides an overview of the budget timeline for the 25-26 process for the General Fund, the HRA and the Capital Programme. At the council budget setting meeting on the 20th of February next year, Council will be required to approve the General Fund budget and the council tax levels for 25-26 and the General Fund medium-term financial plan. It will also be required to approve the housing revenue account budget for 25-26 and the level of housing rents for 25-26 and the medium-term financial plan. It will also be required to approve the capital strategy and capital programme for both the housing revenue account and the General Fund. As a general principle, the high-level strategy for setting the 25-26 budget is as illustrated in the diagram in section 5.3 of the report. Information will be taken from the 24-25 budget, amended for recurring issues identified through the budget monitoring process, which cannot be mitigated against, together with any other known changes, before coming to a balanced budget position for 25-26, and the Council has a statutory requirement to balance its budget. The proposed timeline has been drafted for the scrutiny and approval of the budget for the Children's Trust, and that's set out in the table in section 511 of the report, and the indicative summary timetable for the setting of the wider council budget is set out in the table in section 5.13 of the report. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee has a critical role to play in scrutinising and reviewing the budget proposals, ensuring they are subject to challenge. It is proposed that the detailed scrutiny of the budget is carried out in 2 distinct phases by this committee, which follows on from the process undertaken as part of the 24-25 budget process. Phase 1 of the scrutiny is to be undertaken between the 28th of October and the 21st of November. This first phase of scrutiny will look at the in-year position and the detail of the current budgets and activity, as well as general pressures and opportunities. Phase 2 of scrutiny will take place between the 6th of January and the 21st of January and will be based on the 25-26 draft budget proposals that will be reported to the Executive on the 19th of December. Similar to the process for 24-25, it is proposed that the scrutiny sessions for phases 1 and 2 are split across the main service areas. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee will report their recommendations to the Executive meeting on the 6th of February following phase 2 of the scrutiny process. The Executive must then make recommendations on the final proposals to Council for approval. And I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've just got a couple of words to say before that. So this is really important part of the work that we will be doing. So if you cannot make any of the meetings, please make sure that you get a substitute so that we are a full complex. I know it's quite time-wise and, you know, you won't be able to make you may not be able to make all meetings. But my expectation is that, you know, this is so important. We have a black hole. We do need to do some good work on the budget scrutiny. I would also like to invite the Executive Director of Finance and Performance to give a short briefing at the start of the first budget scrutiny session to explain what she is expecting of the committee throughout the sessions. I'm quite happy to take... I shall ask her first. Is that all right? Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so certainly that is exactly what we want to do, to set out the expectations of the meetings in terms of what we want to achieve, in terms of what part you play in scrutinising the budget. It's going to be a very challenging financial landscape for the financial year 25-26 and into the future. So you do have a critical role in that process. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Griffiths and then Councillor North.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And yeah, I agree that we need to hit the ground running on this, especially with, you know, a settlement and the fact that we've got an autumn budget coming out of government, and we're hearing lots of horror stories, and I'm wondering if it's within the brief of this committee. We're hearing lots of suggestions around employer national insurance contributions, and I wonder if officers could give us some idea of the impacts that that's likely to have on the council, on our businesses and our town centres as we move forward.
Can I abate that question for the moment, because until we have the autumn budget, It's a basket of unknown. There are lots of things that may have an impact on us, especially around the settlements as well, what help and support. But I'm sure that the team will bring those issues coming forward on that when we know more. And I will expect everybody to do their homework as well on certainly around the impact of, you know, what it's going to mean for us as a council.
That's the reason I raised it, Madam Chairman, and
yeah.
I'm sure that they are aware, and
yes.
they're watching with interest, the same as we are, and the same as our residents are. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I fully agree. I have Councillor North.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment and a quick question, which I think I probably know the answer to. Last year worked so much better than the previous years. I think we've got a much better situation last year. What I would plea, and although it's going to be difficult at times, especially when it comes to the actual budget setting programmes, that we have the papers in a timely manner. Because some years ago they came right at the last minute, and there's such a volume to go through. Current year's okay, but when it comes to looking at the future budgets, as you can appreciate, everybody knows, and I appreciate the times of the papers coming right at the end, but we do need to have a chance to read them, if that could be taken into account, please. And the other question is, and I've seen nothing on it, about 6 years ago we went to a temporary 1-year finance settlement from a 3-year settlement, and there was going to be a sudden return to a 3-year settlement. I haven't heard the contrary, that it's still not going to be a one-year interim settlement, even with the new government. In fact, I've heard nothing at all, so I just don't have any information that we're actually going to return to some long-term knowledge about what the finances this council is going to receive from the government.
Yes, and there's a lot of unknowns. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, at the moment, we're not anticipating a multi-year settlement for the autumn statement that's due on the 30th of October. We are hopeful that after that there will be multi-year settlements into 26-27 and onwards. But again, we cannot confirm whether that is correct or not.
Yes, and I'd like to know as well, because that's the other of the things that we said. Councillor Roberts.
Could I just ask for some offers of meetings where some of these complex things on the budget are explained? I know in the past when we've had these and you've explained them, it has helped to prove that I don't know what's going on half the time. No, seriously, this report is a very clear report. It reads well, but it's nice to have somebody there who really knows in depth the budget and can bring the nuances out of it. I know it's more time for the committee, but perhaps we can say you can come if you want to. You don't have to come. It's up to you.
Thank you, Chair. It might be a conversation we take offline. Is it around to understand what you mean in terms of probably around is it training to understand the terminology?
It would be a presentation of the budget. I get told off every time for doing yeah, a sort of hour session where you just go through the budget and it just sets the scene for you and brings out the broad brushstrokes of the budget. I'm not asking to be trained up as an accountant or anything, heaven forfend, but...
And one of those is, if we get the papers in a timely manner, we can have those conversations around, you know, our key lines of inquiry going forward, and we can ask the members if there's something not clear or we want clarification. Is that all right, Claire?
Yes, Chair, that's perfectly fine. One of the things we will be looking to change this year is to bring in that corporate total picture. So currently, when we've done it before, you've just seen the directorates. What you're not seeing is the context for the whole Northamptonshire Council position. So that's also something we're going to bring in this year, so you can see the full budget, the full impact of what each directorate's having and how they play into the full wider picture of the full MTFP. So we'll bring that context and that picture alive during those sessions. Yeah.
Which is music to my ears. I have a number of recommendations that we note the proposed timeline for the setting of the budget and that this may be subject to change in line with government announcements or other factors. Note the proposed budget setting and scrutiny arrangements for the Children's Trust. Note the overall indicative timeline for the budget setting for the Council. Note the proposals for the scrutiny of the Council's budgets. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? Councillor Mark, Councillor Roberts. Thank you very much. All in favour? That's passed. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next. Sorry. Did you want to come back? No? Okay. Item 8, scrutiny work plan. Moving over to Louise for this item.
Thank you, Chair. This is the usual paper that you have each meeting on the Corporate Scrutiny Committee's work plan. They're part of it, and you've got the next two meetings, which are the final two meetings of this committee, for information and any comments.
Any questions on our work planning? No? We have a number of briefings coming forward to us. We've had one briefing already, which there is a deadline for tomorrow. If you haven't made a response to that, please could you, which is the Council Tax Support Fund, which needs to be in by end of play tomorrow. Just reminding you of that, and I've also got to do the same. I've done that without even reading it. Okay. Recommendation to note the scrutiny work plan, which proposed by Councillor Mercer and seconded by Councillor Scott. That being all the items on the agenda, I would like to now formally close the meeting. Thank you for coming. All have a safe journey home, and I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you.